She said it like an afterthought, a half-smile at the corner of her lips, but her voice lingered low enough that I felt it more than heard it. I should have laughed, brushed it off, but instead I stood there, held in the pull of her gaze, wondering why a woman like her had to say it at all. She was my boss, mid-40s, sharp, composed, always carrying herself as though nothing in the world could touch her. Except in moments like this, when her confidence looked too fragile to last more than a second. Her eyes shifted toward me, and then away, as though she regretted giving me that much. I leaned against the edge of her desk, not too close, not too far, the air between us drawn thin. "Then why can't you stay away?" I asked quietly. Her hand, still resting on the stack of papers between us, paused. She didn't answer right away, only tapped the corner of a file with her fingertip, once, twice, like she was buying herself time. The office was too still, too warm. The blinds had let in a stripe of sunlight across the carpet, cutting between us. Dust hung in the air like something suspended, refusing to settle. Every second, she kept silent, only pressed down harder. Finally, she looked up. Her eyes caught mine and held, longer than they should have. She had this way of making silence louder than any answer. I swallowed, not sure if I'd said too much. She leaned back in her chair, exhaling in a way that wasn't quite a sigh. "You think you're clever, don't you?" I shook my head. "Not clever, just noticing things." Her brow lifted. "And what exactly are you noticing?" The question was dangerous. I felt it in the way she tilted her head, the way her voice sharpened without raising volume. My eyes darted, unintentional, the soft line of her wrist where her sleeve slipped back, the faintest movement of her mouth. "Too much," and I looked away too quickly. "That you haven't told me to leave?" I murmured. That stopped her. Her lips parted, then closed again. She shifted in her chair, one hand brushing against her necklace as though remembering it was there. It was a small, nervous movement, but for her, it was enough to give her away. The silence stretched again, so tight it might break. I felt my pulse in my fingertips, resting too still against the desk. Then, without quite meaning to, I let my hand slide closer, brushing against hers. It wasn't bold, just the edge of my skin against hers. A mistake anyone else could dismiss. But she didn't pull away. Instead, she stilled completely, like the contact had frozen her in place. Her eyes flickered down at our hands, then back up to my face, quick, as though catching herself in something she wasn't ready to admit. The room had no air. Or maybe it was just me who couldn't breathe. Her fingers twitched against the wood, not retreating, not leaning in either. I felt the warmth of her skin, even in the smallest touch. She cleared her throat. "This," she began, then stopped. I waited. "This can't." She whispered, the words soft, unfinished. She caught herself, swallowed, her jaw tightening as though she wanted to bite the rest back. And just when it felt like the moment might collapse into something neither of us could undo, the office door creaked open. We both turned. A voice from the hallway called her name. She straightened instantly, pulling her hand away as though it had never been near mine. But her eyes didn't match her movements. For half a second longer, they stayed on me, steady, burning with the things she wouldn't say. I told myself it should have ended at the door. That sharp cut of interruption, her hand pulled away, her composure restored. But when the hallway emptied and the office fell back into silence, I caught the way her shoulders lowered, like she'd been holding herself too tightly. She avoided my eyes. "You should get back to your work," she said, her voice clipped, professional. But I heard the uneven edge in it, the kind of edge people get when they're keeping too much under control. I stayed still, studying her. There were rumors about her, of course. A woman who'd been married once, years ago, but never spoke of it. A string of boyfriends, short-lived, discreet. People liked to fill the gaps in her silence with their own stories. But sitting there, watching the faint tension in her jaw, I wondered how much of it was loneliness wearing a tailored jacket. I shifted closer, leaning on the desk. "Do you always push people away the moment they get near?" Her eyes flickered up, startled, then hardened. "You think you know me?" I shook my head. "I don't. But I notice things." Her laugh was short, unamused. "You're 22. What could you possibly notice about someone like me?" I wanted to say everything. The way she lingered in doorways longer than necessary. The way her hands fidgeted when she was tired, smoothing non-existent wrinkles from her skirt. The way her smile never quite reached her eyes when people tried too hard to impress her. But instead, I just said, Enough to see you're not as untouchable as you want to be. That landed between us like a dropped glass. She blinked once, and I saw something shift, not breaking, but softening. She stood, moving past me toward the window. Her perfume caught in the air, subtle, something warm with a trace of spice. She leaned against the frame, looking out as if the city lights could answer for her. Do you have any idea what people would say? Me and you. The words hung heavy. I followed slower. People will always say something. Doesn't mean they're right. Her hand pressed against the glass, fingers splayed, nails short and clean. I wanted to reach out, to place my hand over hers, but I kept it at my side. She turned slightly, her shoulder brushing against mine. Not intentional, not careless either. The heat of her body, so close, made my chest tighten. She didn't move away right away. The silence stretched, fragile, until she finally whispered, "You don't know what you're asking for." I exhaled, steadying myself. "Then tell me." She didn't. Instead, her eyes lowered, landing on my mouth for just a second too long. When she caught herself, she pulled back, but not before her hand grazed my arm, fingertips lingering just enough to leave fire in their wake. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't anything anyone else would notice. But it was enough. It started with something small. A late evening, the office nearly empty. She was bent over a file, hair loose around her shoulders, glasses slipping lower on her nose. I should have left an hour ago, but I lingered, inventing reasons, pretending to proofread reports I wasn't even reading. Her pen tapped against the page, rhythm sharp. "You're still here," she said without looking up. "So are you." Her lips curved faintly, but she didn't answer. I stood, walking toward her desk. The sound of my footsteps made her glance up, her eyes catching mine before she could hide the flicker of awareness. I stopped too close, leaning on the desk edge, one hand braced near hers. The air tightened. She set her pen down. "You don't make this easy. I don't think you want it easy." Her breath caught, barely audible, but I noticed. For a second, I thought she might admit something, let the words slip past her guard, but then her phone buzzed on the desk. The sound jolted both of us. A name flashed across the screen. I didn't look too closely, but it was enough to remind us both of the world outside this room. She grabbed it quickly, silencing the vibration, her jaw tense. "You should go," she said softly, almost pleading. I didn't move. "Do you want me to?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her eyes stayed fixed on me, trapped in a war she couldn't voice. I leaned closer, close enough to feel her breath brush my cheek. My hand shifted, not touching, but hovering near hers, the heat of her skin drawing me in. "Don't," she whispered. But her body didn't move. The silence stretched. Heartbeats, shallow breaths, the faint tick of the clock on the wall. She tilted her head, eyes dropping to my mouth, and for one suspended moment it felt inevitable. And then, a knock at the door. We sprang apart. One of the junior staff poked her head in, apologetic, asking a quick question about a client file. The interruption was brief, but it might as well have been an explosion. When the door closed again, the office was too quiet. She pressed her hands against the desk, grounding herself, refusing to meet my eyes. "This is reckless," she said finally. "Maybe." I stepped closer again, slowly, giving her the chance to move away. She didn't. My hand brushed her sleeve, light, deliberate. "But you're still here." Her shoulders softened, her defenses faltering. She let out a shaky breath and closed her eyes for a moment too long. When she opened them again, I was still there, close enough that her perfume wrapped around me, close enough to feel the heat rising off her skin. We didn't kiss. We didn't have to. The distance left between us was thinner than a secret, and neither of us moved. It was late again, the kind of night where the building felt deserted, hallways echoing with silence. She had stayed longer than she needed to, and so had I. No excuses this time. No files, no pretense. Just the two of us, caught in the same orbit we kept pretending wasn't there. She stood by the window, arms crossed, city lights spilling across her profile. I leaned against the doorway, watching her longer than I should have. Something about the curve of her shoulders, the way her jaw tightened, made my chest ache. Finally, she turned. "You can't keep looking at me like that." "Like what?" Her eyes flinched. "Like I'm not." She stopped, searching for the words. "Like I'm not too old for this." I pushed off the doorframe, crossing the room slowly. "You're not." She shook her head, a sharp laugh that wasn't really laughter. "You don't understand what people would say. what they already whisper. Maybe I don't care what they say. She stepped back as I drew closer, until her spine touched the wall. Her breathing quickened, shallow, but she didn't tell me to stop. I raised a hand, brushing a strand of hair from her face. My fingers lingered near her temple, the softness of her skin electric beneath my touch. "Tell me to go," I whispered. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Instead, her hand lifted, trembling, hesitant, and rested against my chest. Through the thin fabric of my shirt, I felt the warmth of her palm, steadying me and undoing me at once. "You're making a mistake," she breathed. "Then let me make it." Her eyes searched mine, desperate, conflicted, every emotion she'd buried rising to the surface. She leaned into me without meaning to, her forehead brushing my jaw. The scent of her hair, warm and faintly floral, surrounded me. My arm slid around her waist, pulling her closer than I'd ever dared. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Just the sound of our breaths, tangled together, the racing of my heart against her hand. Finally, she whispered, "I can't stop thinking about you." The confession shattered whatever restraint I had left. I tilted my head, my lips hovering just above hers. She closed her eyes, her breath shaky against my mouth. And then, her phone rang. The sharp sound cut through the moment like glass breaking. She froze, hand still on my chest, eyes snapping open. We didn't move. The phone rang again, buzzing insistently against the desk, pulling her back into the world she was fighting to escape. I stayed still, lips a breath away from hers, my voice low. "If you answer, this ends. If you don't." Her hand tightened against me. The phone kept ringing, and she didn't move. The phone finally stopped ringing, leaving the room suspended in silence again. She stayed pressed against me a second longer, her breathing shallow, her hand still caught between us. Then she stepped back, sudden and sharp, like the contact burned. I thought she would walk away. Instead, she turned toward the desk, fingers trembling as she picked up the phone. Her eyes scanned the screen, unread messages stacked like evidence. She set it down without a word, but her posture was stiff, defensive. I stayed where I was, my hand still aching from where it had held her waist. "Who was it?" She didn't answer right away. Her hands pressed flat against the desk, grounding herself. "Finally," she said, almost to the papers instead of me, "my sister. She called earlier too." I frowned. "That's it." She looked at me then, and I saw it. Not annoyance, not indifference. Fear. "She knows," she whispered. The words sank like stone. "Knows what?" My voice was quieter than I meant it to be. Her gaze didn't waver. "About us. About this." I felt my chest tighten, though this was barely more than stolen touches and unfinished moments. Still, hearing it aloud made it real in a way I wasn't ready for. "How?" Her lips pressed together, a bitter edge to her smile. I wasn't careful. She saw a message I never should have answered. She asked me if there was someone younger, if I was reckless again. Her voice cracked faintly on the last word. The air between us shifted. What had been secret and intoxicating suddenly felt exposed, fragile. I stepped toward her, but she held up a hand. "Don't." The word stopped me, but not the pull. I hovered close, close enough to feel the heat of her body. "What did you tell her?" Her silence was answer enough. My pulse quickened. I wanted to reach for her, shake her free of the fear that kept her distant, but I only let my fingertips brush hers on the desk. She flinched, not away but deeper into stillness, like she couldn't trust herself to move. "You didn't deny it," I said quietly. Her eyes lifted, fierce and vulnerable at once. "How could I? She knows me too well. She knows what I look like when I'm lying, or when I'm hiding something I don't want to admit." The admission was heavier than a kiss. We stood there, bodies drawn together but held apart by the weight of what she'd revealed. I leaned closer, my voice low. "So now it's out there. What happens next?" Her hand finally moved, brushing against mine, hesitant and trembling. "Now, I decide whether to end this before it begins." She didn't pull away this time. Our fingers tangled briefly, fragile and electric. And then she whispered, so soft it barely reached me, "Or whether to let it ruin me." The office was too quiet. Her confession still clung to the air, heavier than the silence that followed. I stood close enough to feel her breath brushing against me, close enough that the weight of the decision pressed on both of us like a storm. She leaned back against the desk, her hands gripping the edge as though it was the only thing holding her steady. Her eyes stayed fixed on mine, wide and uncertain, but she didn't move away. "You should go," she whispered. I stepped closer until barely an inch separated us. "Do you want me to?" Her throat tightened. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. I lifted a hand, slowly, giving her every chance to stop me. My fingers brushed along her jaw, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. She inhaled sharply, her body leaning into the touch before she realized it. "You don't understand," she said, voice trembling now. "If we cross this line, there's no going back." "Maybe I don't want to go back." Her eyes searched mine, desperate for something, permission, denial, a way out. But all she found was the same pull that had been dragging us toward this moment since the first time she said I was trouble. I felt her hands shift from the desk, hesitating before pressing against my chest. She didn't push me away. She just stayed there, palms flat, feeling the rhythm of my heartbeat as if it might answer the question for her. "We'll regret it," she murmured. "Or we'll regret never knowing." Her breath caught. For a heartbeat, she wavered. And then she closed the distance, just enough that her forehead rested against mine. The warmth of her skin, the soft tremor of her body against mine, made the world dissolve around us. Neither of us moved to finish it. The closeness itself was unbearable, every fraction of space charged, every shallow breath pulling us further in. I tilted my head, lips a whisper from hers. "This is your choice," I said softly. She exhaled shakily, her fingers curling into my shirt. The restraint that had bound her for weeks finally gave way. Her mouth brushed against mine, tentative, testing, then deepened, fierce and trembling, as though she'd been holding it back for too long. The kiss wasn't polished. It was messy, unsteady, a clash of fear and hunger. But it was real, raw in a way that stripped us bare. When she finally pulled back, her eyes glistened, her breath uneven. She stayed close, her lips still brushing mine when she whispered, "Now you know." I rested my forehead against hers, my voice low, steady. "And I'm not walking away." For the first time, she didn't argue. She didn't retreat. She just closed her eyes, leaning into me, as if the choice had already been made. The city outside was still alive, but the office had gone quiet, dim with the last traces of evening light. She sat on the edge of the desk, her breathing finally steadier, though her eyes still carried the storm of everything we'd just crossed. I stood in front of her, close enough that our knees brushed, close enough that neither of us could pretend anymore. Her hands rested in her lap, twisting the edge of her sleeve. "This is reckless," she murmured, though her voice was softer now, stripped of its armor. "Maybe," I said. "But does reckless always mean wrong?" Her lips curved faintly, not a smile, not yet, but something loosening in her. "You don't make it easy to be sensible." I reached for her hand, slowly, like it might vanish if I rushed. She let me take it. Her fingers tightened around mine, hesitant at first, then firmer, as though she'd been waiting for someone to hold on. For a moment, we just sat there, our hands linked, the weight of it heavier than any kiss. I traced my thumb gently along the back of her hand, feeling the warmth, the tremor she couldn't hide. "You're too young," she said quietly, though this time it sounded more like memory than protest. "And you're too stubborn to admit you want this," I answered. She let out a shaky laugh, eyes lowering, as if the sound embarrassed her. "Do you have any idea what you're asking for?" "Yeah," I said, leaning closer until our foreheads touched. "You." She inhaled sharply, her free hand rising, almost uncertain, before resting against the side of my face. The tenderness of it undid me. She didn't pull me in, didn't push me away. She just stayed there, like the act of touching me at all was her surrender. I pressed a soft kiss against her forehead. Not rushed, not demanding, just the kind of kiss that said I wasn't going anywhere. Her eyes closed, her shoulders lowering as if some part of her had finally let go of the fight. "You're going to ruin me," she whispered. "Or save you," I said. We stayed like that, breathing the same air, our hands still intertwined, the distance finally gone. She leaned into me, resting her head against my chest. I held her, steady, letting the silence say what words couldn't. For the first time since this started, there was no hesitation in her body. No retreat, no second-guessing. Just the quiet acceptance of something inevitable, messy, and real. And I knew, whatever came next, we'd face it together. Speech Balloon, did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?